Howche Bing has been officially usable in the game for around 8 or so days now, so today I'll be giving you my opinion on the current best 7 March murder ball. I'll start off with 1 March, 2 Marches, 3 Marches, 4 Marches, 5 Marches, and I'll work my way up to the max 7 Marches you can possibly run. So even if you're a free-to-play spender or you're a big whale and you're like completely whaling out, spending everything you possibly can, this video is going to bring you some value as you try and figure out what commanders should you run, which marches are going to be the best, if there's a specific commander you should go and pick up, if you want to run 3 marches, if you should go and get a different troop type. All of this stuff is going to be discussed in today's video. So if you want to know which marches you should be using in Rise of Kingdoms, you definitely want to check out the rest of the video. Let's just start off by discussing when you first reach Season of Conquest, because I know there's going to be a few players here who've just hit Season 3 or Season of Conquest. They're looking to make their first ever march. I recommend just grabbing a primary commander for whichever troop type you have the best equipment and the best commanders for. So if you have really good infantry commanders and good infantry equipment, grab Scipio Prime. If you've got really good Cavs and you've got really good Cav equipment, if it's a Minamoto, you get Nevsky. If it's a Saladin, you get Howche Bing. And your first march will just be Howche Bing with Saladin or Nevsky with Mina. First march for infantry might be Scipio with Alex, Scipio with Martel, Scipio with Mehmed. And then if you're going for an archer march, then you'll probably have a really high level YSG, and then you can just put Boudica with YSG. That is really, really simple if you're running your first ever march when you reach Season of Conquest, and then you can start to get into the more developed marches, which I'll discuss now. Starting off, if you want to run 1 march and you're a Season of Conquest veteran like myself, I wouldn't recommend running only 1 infantry march. I think infantry are the current most lackluster troop, so I'd pick between either getting an archer or a Cav march as your first ever march, and you'd probably just run a Boudica with a ZHUGE, or you can run a Nevsky with a Howche Bing, so that'd be a really, really good single target, absolute nuke right there. It beats every single pair in the game besides Boudica Henry, but that's a very niche pair. So Nevsky with a Howche Bing is going to destroy. I'd use Howche Bing as the primary. Or you can run a Nevsky with a Joan. That's also going to do really good, especially if you already got it and you just want to run that as your only march. I see a lot of low spender free-to-plays run this as their only march. It's very tanky, very powerful on the field, and it's got very, very good rage cycles with Nevsky. His skill tree is pretty nice there. And Joan Prime, best secondary Cav commander in the game. Or if you're a more developed player and you've got Howche Bing now, he trades on average 2,000 to 3,000 7 wins better than Nevsky. So if you want to run just 1 march, when Nevsky's defense debuff may not be as valuable because you are not running a murder ball, then Howche Bing is going to be the best bet with your Joan. So for your first march, you either get Boudica with ZHUGE or you get Nevsky with Joan. Now, if you're going to run 2 marches, now I highly recommend either grabbing an infantry march or you grab whichever march I just discussed before and you didn't get. So let's say you were running a Boudica with a ZHUGE as your first ever march, and you get Boudica maybe to 5-5-5-1, which is just maxing your first 3 skills, and then you expertise ZHUGE, which is what I recommend. And then you'll just go and get like a Nevsky. Possibly you get Nevsky, you put Nevsky with, for example, Howche Bing, you put the Nevsky with the Joan, like I said before. That is a really good too much meta ball. So you'd end up running like a Boudica with a ZHUGE, which is the current meta archer combination, and then you'd run a Nevsky with a Joan, which is one of the meta Cav combinations, or you run a Nevsky with a Howche Bing or a Howche Bing with a Joan. So you're going to be in a really, really good position there for 3 marches. And then if you wanted to grab an infantry march, I'd recommend either getting a Guan with a CPO, because I feel like Guan's going to give you a lot more value if you're running 2 marches instead of like 4 or so marches where Sargon becomes really good. And obviously CPO best infantry commander currently in the game. So if you want to grab 2 marches and you want infantry to be one of those marches, highly recommend getting a Guan and a CPO and then putting it either with a Boudica ZHUGE or an Alexander Nevsky with a Howche Bing or an Alexander Nevsky with Joan, or you get any of those Cav combinations. So that's going to be your best bet for 2 marches if you want to grab an infantry. But I will caution you in investing in Guan right now if you don't already have him, because I think that the next infantry will be somewhat better Guans, because he's been out for a while. He was like the most popular commander in the game. I think it would be crazy of Lilith not to cash in on their brand new Guan commander card anytime soon. So keep that in mind. If you do get Guan, he may not have as much future proofing. So if you want to get Sargon, he is a very good commander still. Keep in mind though, he's doing less damage than Guan, and he's not going to give you as much instant value, especially if you're only using 2 marches. Now, if you're using 3 marches, you're moving into the one of each troop type, because the current meta is running a mixed troop type. Before, I would have told you like a year ago, 2 years ago, just go all in on one troop type. Go all infantry, all Cavs, all archers. But nowadays, because there's so many powerful commanders across every tier that just demolish other levels of commanders, like other releases, you kind of have to run one of each troop type. So I highly recommend running a Boudica with a ZHUGE for 3 marches, running a Nevsky with a Joan or a Howche Bing with a Joan. I think that Howche Bing with Nevsky at this point, it's really, really single target DPS. You can still run it. It's still going to do extremely good, but I think you want a little bit more AoE in your murder ball, since AoE is a really good thing, especially if you're running 3 marches. That's a very free-to-play level to be at. This is where I recommend most free-to-players to stop. 3 marches, really good spot. And then the final march you'd either run a Guan with a CPO, or you'd run a Sargon with a CPO. So Either one of those, you have to have the CPO in that murderball. He can either be the primary to the Sargon, or he could be the secondary to the Sargon, and primary Guan will always be the primary. So make sure you're running at least one of each troop type. You could run other mixed matches. So for example, if you don't have ZHUGE and you don't want ZHUGE, you could just run Boudica with YSG. It's still extremely good. It might not be the meta pairing, but that's a really, really good archer substitute if you already have YSG, but you don't have ZHUGE. If you don't have, for example, let's say Hao Bing, or you don't have Nevsky, you could run either one of the commanders with a Minamoto. So Hao Bing with Mina is decent. Nevsky with Mina is decent. Make sure you double relic the Minamoto, and that's going to be a good cav commander if you want to run just 3 marches for now, and then you get like Joan later on. And then if you have no infantry, you could run Scipio with Alex, or you could run Scipio with Mehmed or Charles Martel. I've seen those marches perform fairly decently, and that's going to give you a nice substitute commander as you work on another commander such as Guan or work on Sargon. I highly recommend choosing out a substitute commander right now if you're going to make an inf march today, and get the Scipio and then put him with, for example, a Martel, put him with an Alex who you might already have invested in, because at that point, you won't have to invest in Guan, who might not become a proper investment for quite a while, and I think that is a really good idea to save some gold heads for the next infantry commanders. Now we've reached your 4 marches, and this is where almost every single free-to-play low spender should really stop, because at this point, you've gotten all the meta commanders, and after this, you're starting to get some of the less powerful commanders. While still being powerful, they are more niche and more specialized, but for 4 marches, you're going to be running 1 infantry. I highly recommend running a CPO with a Guan primary at this point, or you can run the Sargon with the CPO if you want to get the extra debuffs. That is definitely much more valuable now that you run a full much murderball. Sargon is definitely a much more powerful commander. His debuffs are way more useful, especially because you are using more commanders. And then for your Archer March, you're still only going to be running 1 Archer March. I highly recommend running a Boudica with a ZHUGE at this point, or you could still stick with a Boudica and a YSG. They are similar, but ZHUGE is going to trade a fair decent amount better. So if you can at this point, go and get a ZHUGE, hopefully expertise him. That is going to be really nice for you. And I recommend running 2 cav marches. They currently have the most powerful commanders in the game, as in they have the most very powerful commanders. And I'd recommend running a Hao Bing with a Joan Prime. This combination trades around 2,000 to 3,000 sevs better than the counterpart with Nevsky, and then running a Nevsky with a William. That is really, really good. You've got the very, very powerful Kitten William. He's a very supportive commander, so especially if you're not running Sargon, this is going to be extremely powerful with your Nevsky. And then you run the Hao Bing with the Joan to be a very good DPS march, and Joan's giving some support, and Hao Bing is giving you a march speed debuff, and the only commander currently in your murderball who's going to be giving one is Boudica. So you're left with a really solid 4-march murderball right there. You're running 2 cav marches, you're running 1 archer march, and you're running 1 infantry march. Now, what if you want to run 5 marches and you're really hitting the whale territory here? This is where you get to the point where you're like, wow, I have to really maintain a lot of marches, I need a lot of equipment, it's a lot of gold heads to really be investing. And a lot of players who run 5 marches either are free-to-play low spenders who just go all in on a bunch of commanders to like a 5-5-1-1, 5-5-5-1 level, or they are whales who just go all in on commanders and expertise them. If you're running 5 marches, I recommend sticking with the same 2 cav marches as before. At this point, you definitely want to have the Hao Bing with the Joan, and you definitely need William. If you're running 5 marches, it's time to bench that Minamoto, and then you go and grab the William because he's going to bring so much value for your murderball, and he's going to be an amazing debuffing commander, and you run Nevsky as the primary to the William. If you really don't want William, maybe you don't think his kit is like something that you really need, you can still run an XY with a primary to Nevsky. Just keep in mind at that point though, your calves are really all DPS and you're missing a lot of the support that William does bring. That is why I prefer the William over the Zhang Yu with your Nevsky for a second cav march. For your infantry march, you're only going to still be running 1 infantry march. You can consider running 2, and I will give you that alternative at the end. But if you want to run 1 infantry march, Guan with Scipio or Sargon with Scipio, they're going to be your best bet, and that's a very, very simple infantry ball. And then if you want to go and grab the next march, which I recommend as an archer march, you're going to run 2 combinations here. You could run a Boudica with a ZHUGE still and just stick with that march. And then you can grab a commander like YSG. A lot of players already have YSG, and put him with Henry. Henry may not be a debuffing commander, but he is one of the most tanky commanders in the game currently, especially for archer units. He's got extremely high DPS, and he can actually counter some of the meta calves. I've seen it firsthand in the Battle Report Simulator. Henry with Boudica beats Nevsky with Hao Bing. Just crazy. I don't know how it happened, but it won 2 out of the 3 reports that I did. So I will be interested in running this a little bit more, and I'll discuss that a bit at the end of the video. But for the most part, Henry with Boudica, oddly enough, is a really, really good pair for dueling. So if you are in a situation where you find you're getting swarmed a lot, you can drop that 5th march, put it with the Boudica. You've got a really tanky march right there. It is benching his ZHUGE temporarily, but it is still a very good march. You could also consider running Henry with ZHUGE and then running something such as a Boudica with an Artemisia. Keep in mind though, Artemisia a little bit of a more tough investment. Or running a YSG with your Boudica if you already have her. So that leaves you with a really, really tanky primary Henry with a really, really squishy secondary ZHUGE. And that leaves you with that tanky primary, high stats, very, very high single target DPS, and then super glass cannon, ridiculous DPS secondary, and then if you do YSG with your Boudica, you're in a similar situation, and I definitely recommend running a Boudica because her debuffs are really good. So make sure you are running at least the Boudica at the minimum if you're running the archers. And then I would recommend getting that Henry with the ZHUGE. If you want to run a weirder march like Nebu, you could run Nebu YSG and then also stick with the Boudica with the ZHUGE. But personally, like I said before, Henry, ZHUGE, and then Boudica with Artemisia is going to be your best bet if you're running 2 archer marches, 2 cav marches, and 1 infantry march. Now, if you want to run 2 infantry marches and you don't think Henry is something you want, drop the Henry out. He's a Mightiest Governor commander. Can be difficult for some players to access. More of a Wayne League commander or more of a very specified commander. For example, I use only archer units. He's really good for me. But for some players, he may not be an option for you. So drop the Henry march out. Continue running Boudica ZHUGE. And then you grab a second infantry march. And here, you definitely have to, at this point, run the Guan with the CPO. It's going to be the best bet. So if you already have Guan, you want to run 2 infantry marches, Guan with CPO, and then you could go with a Sargon and a Tariq. That's a really good combination. Sargon's oddly enough a fairly tanky commander. Like, he brings a lot of stats. He's got nice march speed. He's also got a fair amount of all damage, and overall, he's a fairly tanky commander. Tariq, on the other hand, not as tanky. He's actually got some tanky stats, but mainly, he's there for a little bit of march speed outside of territory, and he's just there for the DPS. He's got crazy high DPS. I think it's around 2,700, 2,000... It's like 3,400 possible damage factor on 1 skill cycle. So, really, really powerful commander for running if you just want him right now. He's similar to Henry, but the infantry version, in the way that he's a glass cannon, Sargon's a tanky commander, but he's a Mightiest Governor commander. It's supposed to be a rally, so if you want to get him, it's basically like getting the infantry version of Henry, and he's going to do well on the open field, but like Henry, over time, they're going to fall off a lot quicker, which is why I don't really like running 5 marches for lower spender free-to-plays. But if you want to grab the infantry march, you would run a Sargon with a Tariq, and then you'd run a Guan with the CPO. That is what I recommend for 5 marches if you want 2 infantry, 2 cavs, and 1 archer. Now, what do I recommend for 6 marches? And keep in mind, if you're getting 6 marches, you are a whale. Whales only get 6 marches, because if you're getting 6 marches, you need to get Crystal Tech to get that 6th march to actually make it usable, like actually able to use it. So I highly recommend most players do not go for 6 marches. 5 marches is a real big stretch. That's where you start to get commanders such as Henry and Tariq, who are very specialized, and if you do get them, they start to lose value over time. But 6 marches is A, you're getting less valuable commanders, and B, you have to pay for Crystal Tech. So I highly recommend most free-to-play low spenders stick away from 6 marches. It is where it becomes a lot more difficult to maintain. So starting off for 6 marches, you're going to run the Houchibing with the Joan and the Nevsky with the William. You definitely need William at this point. I drop XY. You can consider Chandragupta. I've made a video on him, really good debuffs, but I still think William is a lot better. So if you can run Nevsky with the William, I highly recommend it. And Houchibing with Joan is essential. Those are the, in my opinion, 2 best cav commanders at the moment. Nevsky, really, really close with Houchibing, almost on par. Then for your archer marches, this is where you have to run 2 archer marches at this point. You are at 6 marches. I recommend running 2 of each troop type. So you're going to run either Boudica with ZHUGE or Boudica with Artemisia. If you run Boudica with Artemisia, you run Henry with ZHUGE. If you don't run Boudica with Artemisia and you run Boudica with ZHUGE, you run Henry with YSG, Cyrus, Nebu, really any archer commander that's somewhat in the meta. I do recommend, honestly, for most players to steer away from Cyrus. He's very specialized. For me, he's a really good commander. For some other players, he may not be. So if you want to get a more AoE-related commander, I recommend YSG. Most players have him, so if you want to buy him from the daily, or you could buy Nebu in the daily bundle, and he is still an extremely good option as well. Henry with Nebu is an extremely fast combo as well. So if you find that your archers are getting called out a lot, even though Henry's fairly tanky, it shouldn't be too big of an issue, but if you find that they are getting called out, Henry's got a lot of march speed outside of Alliance territory. Pair that with Nebu's march speed, you're going to get away from pretty much every situation with that march. Keep in mind though, your Boudica with the ZHUGE is probably going to be one of, if not your slowest march, so I recommend if you do not have the best equipment for it, put a Call of the Loyal in the accessory slot. It's actually going to be extremely valuable for this march, and you will notice that it's going to save you from taking a lot of sevs. Especially if you're running Boudica with Artemisia, that march is definitely not as DPS heavy as Boudica with ZHUGE, so it doesn't make up as much when it gets called out in the field. So if you have a Call of the Loyal and you don't have any other accessories, slap it on this march, it's going to do very good. Then for your infantry marches, you'll be running 2 infantry marches. You'll be running a Guan with a CPO. The Guan has to be the primary, CPO has to be the secondary. It's pretty much essential at this point that you're running a CPO with a Guan or something like that. Guan, very powerful silence. CPO, literally the best infantry commander, so they must be together. Then I would grab a Sargon with a Tariq. Very simple. If you don't want Tariq because you know he's a Mightiest Governor commander and you have an expertise Alex already, Alex will work. If you have an expertise Harold already, I don't recommend getting them over Tariq, but if you have them already, you can put them with a Sargon and it's going to be a very good combination. Keep in mind though, if you are running the Alex with the Sargon, there is a lot of overshielding, but I've noticed that this combination performs well. It's fairly fast and can get away from tough situations. So if you want to run that as your second infantry march, it is an option. though overall Tarek is going to perform a little bit better. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't go out of my way to get Alex. I wouldn't go out of my way to get Harold. But if you have them and you don't have Tarek and you want to skip him because he's an MGE commander, they will work for your second infantry march. Now you've hit 7 marches. This is the whale territory. You have to spend around $500 US a KVK to really properly be able to run 7 marches and be an extremely active player. So if you're willing to spend that kind of money and play actively enough, this is worth it. It's fun. It's a good experience. But keep in mind, there are other priorities in life for a lot of people. So if you are one of those people, you're a normal person in some situations, 7 marches may be very difficult for you to run. So keep that in mind if you're running 7 marches. I don't recommend it for low spenders or free-to-plays. It's almost impossible to achieve unless fighting like in the last 3 days of KVK. So 7 marches, I recommend not doing for 99% of players. But if you're that 1%, what you do is for 7 marches, continue with the 6 march murder ball I mentioned before. That is leaving you with a Guan and a CPO and then a Sargon with a Tarek. Then you would run as your archer marches, your 2 archer marches. Boudica with Artemisia has to be Artemisia at this point. And then you'd run Henry with ZHUGE. Then from there, you could also run your 2 cav marches. And those are going to be a Nevsky with a William. That's going to be a really, really good support march, especially at 7 marches. And then Houchepping with Joan for crazy DPS. That is what you run for the 6 marches. Now for the 7th, what would you do? Well, if you want to run 3 cav marches, you would run a Zhang Yu with a Chandragupta. Really, really good support. Chandragupta is bringing a fair amount of debuffs in his whole entire kit. Plus, he's got decent damage himself. It is not up to standard with complete meta. Like, he's not a meta commander, but it is very good damage. And Zhang Yu is bringing the faster rage cycle and almost meta damage as well. So, really, really powerful commanders. Nice debuffs on Zhang Yu. He's got a rage reduction for himself, and he's got a defense reduction in an AoE. So, I like his debuffs. Chandragupta bringing really good passive skill debuffs, so they will stack with anyone. So I really like that as a support cav march if you want to run 3 calves. If you want to run 3 archers, a little bit more difficult. You have to make a decision, more DPS. You could just go a Nebu with a YSG, and then you'd have the Henry with the ZHUGE and the Boudica with the Artemisia still. So it doesn't affect any of your current marches, and it's going to set you up really well. But if you want a support march, Tamaris is always an option. She's really good at 7 marches. Like, if you want to run her, she's going to do decently. You could run a Honda with a Tamaris. I personally don't recommend it, but if you want to just get her debuffs and you don't really care if it trades bad, then it's going to do really good. If you want to run an Archer March, a pure Archer March with it, I recommend Gilgamesh with Tamaris. You're getting a 30% health debuff on Gilgamesh, plus the blood craving effect. Plus, he's fairly tanky for an Archer commander, so he's going to work well. Keep in mind, though, it's very lackluster on March speed, so I actually recommend using a Call of the Loyal and going out of your way to use it on this March. And that will help it trade a lot better by being able to get away from bad situations. So Gilgamesh with Tamaris is really good. If you need talent trees and all that, I'll have a playlist linked on the end screen. For my playlist, basically on all the Archer commanders, where I gave a talent build for Gilgamesh that is related to Tamaris. And I did one for Ramses as well. Since Ramses, Tamaris is also decent if you want to run it. And Ramses is going to kind of solve that March speed issue, because whenever he gets hit, there's a 10% chance to gain a bunch of March speed and pretty much get away from any situation. So if you want to run Ramses with Tamaris, it's going to do really good. And if you want to run Gilgamesh, it's going to do a little bit better in terms of the damage and the tankiness, but it's going to have less March speed. So there's the trade-offs you could get. But overall, I wouldn't really recommend running this March. It is a little bit outdated, and Sargon does do most of the utility Tamaris does. But if you really like the debuff Sargon is bringing, and you want to kind of double down, Tamaris is going to do good, and her debuffs do stack with his. Then for your infantry, if you run around 3 marches, Pakal and Harold, I mean, that's really all you could do. They are very, very rarely. You have to really be able to have high crystal tech and deal a lot of extra damage to use them. So if you want to use them right now, they're going to do good. They're just never ever going to trade that amazing. You'll never see like a 1-5 trade. You'll always see like 1-2, 1-3, maybe like a 1-4 if you're lucky. And if you get swarmed down, they're going to trade like even. They never ever trade bad. I don't see Pakal and Harold that trades negative unless it's like a one-on-one battle with meta Archer commanders. So Pakal and Harold, very, very strong for Wales and extremely good if you want to run 3 infantry marches, because the other options pretty much suck. Like Constantine and Richard are literally useless, and most of the other commanders here are useless. I also forgot to mention one thing for calves. You could run Attila and Takeda if you want the DPS, but I personally would recommend not doing that. I think Chandragupta with XY is a lot better and more utility. But if you want a Pakal and Harold like commander, but you want to run calves, Attila Takeda is a good option. And then if you don't want any of those, you want just a pure march that's just going to pretty much buff and support everything, grab a leadership march, grab a Trajan, and put him with literally anyone. Trajan with any of the leadership commanders is going to be really good. So Trajan with Caesar is a really nice pair. Caesar's bringing a lot of March speed, which I think Trajan is lacking, and a lot of tankiness to give Trajan that extra edge. Trajan with Ethelfled, really good debuffs. Keep in mind though, with Ethelfled, her debuffs are a little bit outclassed by some of the newer commanders who have the same debuffs. And then finally, you've got commanders such as Honda, commanders such as Mehmed, who literally make him a stronger commander, like just make Trajan stronger. Caesar is more of a tanky commander, and these two commanders are more of DPS tank mix. And then finally, you got Trajan with a Mulan, which is going to be your best overall buffing march. and also fairly tanky since Mulan herself is a tanky commander, and then her relic makes her even more tanky. So if you want the best leadership march, I'd personally recommend a Trajan with a Mulan, but keep in mind, tests do show that if you're running 7 pure damage marches, it performs a little bit better than running 7 marches and one of them being a Trajan. So keep that in mind if you want to run the Trajan. I personally recommend picking one of the Cav infantry or archer marches if you can. Now I hope this video did bring you some value. There are obviously a lot of alternative marches you could run. I didn't discuss literally the set in stone marches, so if you have marches that work, let people know in the comments. It is always nice. But mainly what I want to say is I have a live stream coming up very soon, tomorrow at 10 UTC. It should be scheduled to go up tonight at some time, and the link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. So if you want to come by the live stream, I'll be checking out all the new stuff dropping in the update. Like, there is a ton of stuff here. I'll be going over literally all of it to see what looks cool, what looks like it's going to be completely game-breaking, what is actually, like, interesting. And then I'll also be going over the new Golden Kingdom event, because that is going to be in-game as well, and I'll probably release a video on that as well. But Golden Kingdom, very interesting. Apparently, they've completely, like, redone the event. So if you want to see what this is going to be like, plus everything coming in the new update, pretty much as it releases, you definitely want to check out tomorrow's live stream. It's going to be a really, really fun time. Like I said, it'll be in the pinned comment and in the description. Now, I trust I thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.